Some people say that Beethoven used to hear melodies playing in his mind as if they already existed somewhere, and all he had to do was write them down. Some people solve complex math problems in their sleep. Others find an entirely new direction for their lives after a single, deeply peaceful night of rest. These stories aren't meant to glorify anything strange or mystical. They're meant to remind us of something simple. Intelligence doesn't live only in our waking awareness. It stretches across deeper layers, layers we can only reach when the soul steps outside its familiar limits. So if sleep isn't just rest, what is your soul doing during those hours? You can test this yourself. On nights when you go to bed feeling heavy, your dreams tend to be tangled, intense, exhausting. On nights when you fall asleep having softened, having let go of some thoughts, dreams often feel lighter, or you don't remember them at all, yet you wake up feeling strangely at ease. That tells us something important. Sleep is not random. It reflects, with surprising honesty, the inner state you carry with you when you close your eyes. Every night you go to sleep, it isn't just your body that rests. Something within you is leaving. And if you've ever woken up with your heart racing, emotions still vivid, as if you had just lived through another lifetime, then you may have brushed against a boundary that most people cross their entire lives without ever noticing. We're taught that sleep exists only to restore the body, that dreams are just random byproducts of the brain. And yet, there are mornings when you wake up feeling hollow, moments when you feel like you don't quite belong to this rhythm of life. Sadness without a clear cause, quiet questions about death, about meaning, about why you're here at all, questions that keep growing inside you, with no one showing you how to face them. The pain isn't that you're tired. The pain is that you're living without knowing where your soul is. This video isn't about dreams in the usual sense. It speaks of sleep as a doorway, a place where the soul steps beyond familiar limits, moves through unseen layers of reality, revisits memory, reconnects with love, faces fear, and sometimes heals in ways daytime life simply cannot. We'll move together through the deepest layers of sleep, a place where the dead are not entirely gone, where intuition is not accidental, where light exists, but so does shadow, and where every dream leaves a mark on the life you wake back into. If you've ever felt that this life is only a small part of something much larger, then this isn't a video to watch casually. It's a story meant to help you reclaim yourself. Stay until the end, not for the strange ideas, but because after this, you may sleep differently, live differently, and look at your dreams with entirely new eyes. If you're looking for content that doesn't just sound meaningful but helps you understand your soul more deeply, heal from within, and live with direction, follow this channel. Every video here is created not just to reach your thoughts, but to touch the most real part of you, the part that quietly speaks whenever you close your eyes. Part 1. When sleep is more than rest. There are mornings when you wake up feeling drained, and the exhaustion doesn't come from your body. You're not sick. You didn't miss sleep. Nothing is obviously wrong. And yet, inside, you feel heavy, like you've just passed through something deep, as if last night you didn't simply lie still in bed, but lived another chapter of life somewhere else. When you wake, only fragments remain. A glance, a sentence, an emotion you can't name. And the strange thing is, even if you can't remember it clearly, you know it was real. I used to think that feeling came from stress, from work, from overthinking, until I realized something very simple, something no one ever taught us. People don't only get tired from doing too much. They also get tired when the soul doesn't get to return to where it belongs. We live in a world that celebrates alertness, action, control. Sleep is treated like a blank, unconscious gap where everything dissolves into meaningless images. But what if that isn't true? What if every night, when you close your eyes, a part of you steps through a door that can never open during the day? Here's a quiet paradox. The older we get, the less we dream, or more accurately, the less we remember dreaming. We wake up and rush straight into life, brushing aside the echoes of the night as if they don't matter. But the soul doesn't operate on that schedule. It doesn't measure time with clocks. It measures time through stillness. And when daytime life becomes too orderly, too fast, too filled with calculation, the soul has only one way left to speak through sleep. I once met a middle-aged man who seemed perfectly fine on the outside. Stable job, peaceful family. Yet he told me that for years, every morning he woke up feeling like he had lost something deeply important. Not clear sadness, not sharp pain, just emptiness. He said that some nights he dreamed of standing in a vast place. No people, no sound, only a feeling of familiarity that was almost unsettling. When he woke, he missed that place more than he missed his youth. Later, he understood that what he missed wasn't a location. It was a state of being himself, without roles, without tension, without titles. We don't suffer only because of loss. We suffer because we don't understand what's happening inside us. When we don't understand, we call it fatigue, crisis, mild depression. Very few people stop to ask whether their soul is starving, not for material things, but for connection, for listening, for permission to continue its journey each night, instead of being dragged back by worries that never fully loosen their grip. If you look deeper, sleep is not a shutdown. It's the moment consciousness steps aside so another layer of you can rise. That layer doesn't speak in logic. It doesn't explain. It shows, through images, emotions, stories that seem irrational yet linger long after waking. There are dreams you can never fully describe because language isn't enough. But you know that after them, you're no longer the same person. And maybe you've wondered why certain dreams soften your heart, why they make you want to slow down, love more deeply, forgive more easily, even when, during the day, you still feel hard. Those changes don't come from thinking, they come from a deeper layer, a place where the soul touches something far larger than the small self that tries to control your life every day. Most of us live as if there is only one world, the visible one. Yet deep inside, there's always a faint sense that this isn't the whole truth. That life feels like a very thin slice of something much larger, much deeper. And sleep is the rare opening through which you can glimpse what lies beyond. Not everyone remembers. Not everyone is ready. But the soul still goes, whether you believe it or not. The beginning of this story isn't meant to convince you of anything. It simply invites you to pause for a moment before going to sleep tonight and ask yourself, if sleep isn't just rest, then what is my soul doing during those hours? That question, if you truly let it touch you, opens a very different path. And from here, we begin to move into places the soul visits every night, but that few people ever name. In the next part, we'll speak about the first place many souls pass through. A place that is neither heaven nor hell, a place where the boundary between the living and those who have passed becomes so thin that a single dream is enough to meet again. Part 2. The borderland, where the ones we love have not disappeared. There is something very hard to put into words, but if you've experienced it, you'll recognize it instantly. The feeling of meeting someone who has passed away in a dream. Not a vague or distorted dream, but a meeting so clear that when you wake up, you don't cry from sadness, but from how real it was. The voice is the same, the eyes are the same. The way they look at you, without needing to say much, lets you know they are still watching over you. What confuses you most isn't fear, it's the familiarity, as if there had never been any separation at all. We're taught that death is an ending, but the soul doesn't operate with periods. It moves through continuity. There are places where life and death aren't sharply divided the way we imagine. Edgar Cayce called one such place the borderland, an intermediate space. A place where souls that have just left the body remain connected to the earthly world through love, memory, and words left unsaid. It isn't heaven. It isn't darkness. It's more like a quiet corridor where the soul pauses before moving on. And it's also a place the living can touch through sleep. I once heard a woman describe a dream in which she met her mother, who who had passed away more than 10 years earlier. In the dream, they didn't embrace. They didn't cry. They simply sat beside each other, quietly. Her mother said a few ordinary things, told her to take care of her health, to stop pushing herself so hard. When she woke up, the woman said what stayed with her wasn't grief, but a deep sense of relief, as if someone had placed a hand on her shoulder and said, "You're not alone." That feeling stayed with her for years, enough to help her stand through phases of life that once felt unbearable. We often hesitate to speak about dreams like this. We're afraid of being seen as weak, imaginative, or unable to accept loss. But deep down, many people continue living because of moments exactly like these. A glance in a dream, a quiet sentence, a simple nod. They don't bring the dead back, but they keep love from being broken. And perhaps that is what the soul needs most after leaving the body. To know it is still remembered, still able to touch those it loves, even if only in the fragile space of sleep. Another story appears in Casey's readings about a man who had lost everything. His career completely collapsed. At his lowest point, he dreamed of his father, long deceased, appearing and showing him a very specific path forward. When he woke, he hesitated deeply, but with nothing left to lose, he followed it. Years later, he rebuilt his life, more solid than before. When he returned to ask Casey about it, the answer was brief. He wasn't imagining it. He met his father in the borderland. That statement isn't meant to prove anything mystical. It simply reminds us that guidance sometimes comes from places reason cannot reach. The borderland isn't something you go looking for out of curiosity. It appears naturally, at the right moment, often when you are weakest, emptiest, and most honest with your pain. When daytime defenses fall away, the soul becomes soft enough to touch those subtle connections. And not every visit from the dead carries a grand message. Sometimes they come simply to be present, to remind you that love is not limited by form, and death does not have the power to erase what was bound by sincerity. If you've ever had a dream like this, don't dismiss it too quickly. Don't force yourself to explain it away. Some things don't need to be understood, only felt. And the sense of peace that follows such a dream is often the greatest healing gift the soul brings back. It doesn't erase longing, but it keeps longing from knocking you down. The borderland teaches us something quietly profound. Separation is not as absolute as we think. There are invisible threads still connecting souls, and sleep is when those threads begin to vibrate. When you understand this, you stop fearing strange dreams. You begin to listen to them as whispers, gentle, unforced, yet deep enough to help you remain steady in a world full of change. And once you've passed through the borderland, when grief is no longer a wall blocking the heart, the soul continues its journey. There is another place, deeper and wider, a place not only holding loved ones, but the entirety of your own memory, not just from this lifetime, but from many layers you've never recalled with the mind. This is where answers don't come as words, but as recognition. In the next part, we enter that space. Part 3. The Akashic Records, where the soul remembers what the mind has forgotten. After passing through the borderland, where emotion and love remain intact, the soul does not stop. It moves more lightly, more deeply, into a place without familiar human forms. No faces to recognize, no words for dialogue. Edgar Casey called this place the Akashic Records, a simple name for a space where every experience of the soul is preserved. Nothing is lost, nothing fades, nothing is erased by time. It may sound distant, but if you look closely at your own life, the traces are familiar. Have you ever met someone for the first time and felt as though you'd known them forever? Not social familiarity, but a quiet closeness that's hard to explain, as if simply sitting beside them brings a sense of ease. Or have you ever entered a place you've never been before, yet felt your heart soften, as if the soul had returned somewhere old? These moments are not random. They are moments when the soul lightly touches a page of memory that was written long before. I once heard a story about a middle-aged woman with no medical training, no scientific background. In a dream, she entered a vast, luminous space with endless corridors. A being of light guided her to a book and opened it, showing her clear lines describing a herbal healing method. When she woke, she remembered every detail vividly. At first, she thought it was imaginary, but with no other option left for her critically ill child, she followed what she had seen. What happened next surprised everyone. The child's body began to recover. Edgar Cayce spoke briefly about this case. The mother's soul accessed the Akashic Records and brought back what her family needed most at that moment. The Akashic Records are not reserved for special people. They do not open based on status or intellect. They open when the soul is quiet enough to remember that you are not only a person of this lifetime, not only a collection of what you've learned from books. Some knowledge doesn't come from thinking. It comes from deep recognition, as if you're not learning it for the first time, but remembering something you once knew. This also explains why ideas come to people in dreams, not after chains of logical analysis, but in moments of stillness. You sleep, and when you wake, the answer is already there. No proof needed, no long explanations. You simply know what to do, where to go, where to stop. Such intuitions are often accurate because they don't arise from fear or ambition. They come from a deeper layer of the soul's memory. Some say Beethoven heard melodies in his mind as if they already existed somewhere, and he merely wrote them down. Some people solve complex equations in their sleep. Others discover a new path for their lives after a single peaceful night. These stories aren't meant to glorify strangeness. They remind us that intelligence does not live only in waking consciousness. It stretches across deeper layers, reachable only when the soul steps beyond familiar limits. The Akashic Records don't only preserve the past, they also reveal future possibilities, not as fixed outcomes, but as potential paths, depending on one's inner state and choices. In dreams, you might see a direction, a warning, or simply a feeling that you shouldn't continue as before. When you wake, you still have free will. But if you listen carefully, you'll sense that the soul has handed you a subtle map. Not everyone can touch this place often. The Akashic Records don't open to a noisy mind. They don't appear when you sleep in anxiety, anger, or calculation. They appear when you are honest with your question, when you're not begging for results, only seeking understanding. Perhaps that's why most dreams feel fragmented, and only rarely does one arrive that stays with you for life. If you've ever woken up with a strange certainty, as if someone quietly pointed the way, don't dismiss it. You may have brought back a small piece of your own memory. The Akashic Records don't speak loudly, they whisper, and the soul always knows when to whisper if you give it enough silence. But the soul's journey doesn't end with remembering. After memory, after the written pages, there is still a deeper layer, a place where there is no personal story. No, you and me, where the soul doesn't read or recall, but dissolves. In the next part, we enter that realm, called by many names, but when touched, all anyone can do is fall silent. Part 4. The pure spiritual realm, when the soul stops seeking and simply remembers. After the soul has passed through its memories, after touching what was once forgotten and carried through many layers of life, the journey does not end. There is a deeper level still, a place where the soul no longer stands before invisible books, no longer reviews personal stories, but begins to dissolve into something far greater. Edgar Cayce called this place the pure spiritual realm. The name may sound distant, but the feeling, when touched, is strangely familiar. In this realm, there are no clear images to describe, no faces, no words, no scenery as we understand it. There is only a state of consciousness, bright, calm, profoundly still. It's as if all the questions that once tormented you suddenly no longer need answers, not because they were explained, but because you no longer feel lacking. Some people wake from such dreams remembering nothing specific. They only know that their inner weight has lifted. Old worries shrink. Old wounds remain. but lose their sharp edges, and quietly, life begins to change. Not through striving harder, not through pushing more, but through softness, greater kindness toward oneself, deeper compassion for others, as if a deep source of energy was touched and continues to spread silently afterward. Edgar Cayce once described leaving his body during sleep and seeing movements far beyond personal life. Large shifts in the world, conflicts, changes that no one yet imagined. Years later, they unfolded. Yet Cayce always emphasized that the point was not predicting the future. In the pure spiritual realm, the soul accesses greater possibilities, not to control them, but to understand that each individual exists within a much larger current than themselves. There is another story, less often told. After many years working in a war hospital, a female nurse began to feel completely drained. She no longer saw meaning in what she did. The wounds kept repeating. The losses never seemed to end. One night, after practicing a few very simple instructions for inner stillness before sleep, she dreamed that she stepped into a space filled with light. There she saw wounded souls being healed, not through words, not through intervention, but through pure presence alone. When she woke up, she didn't bring back new knowledge. She brought back something else, a deep, unshakable certainty that her work, however small it seemed, was part of a much greater healing. From that point on, her presence alone made the people around her feel calmer. The pure spiritual realm does not give people power, it gives them meaning. Not meaning defined by achievement, but by resonance. When the soul touches this level, it remembers that it is not alone, not separate, not abandoned in a random world. It remembers that it is part of a river flowing through love, even when daily life feels harsh. Many people have described dreaming of being surrounded by light, or feeling as if they were held in invisible arms. There is no specific message, no instruction. Yet when they wake up, they no longer want to live the same way. Not out of fear, but because they no longer wish to harm life. Cayce often said that the pure spiritual realm is not reserved for anyone special. It does not select. It does not favor. The issue is not ability, but preparation of consciousness. When you enter sleep filled with resentment, jealousy, or a need to control, the soul cannot travel far. But when you enter sleep with a clear intention, however small, to understand, to heal, to live more kindly, that doorway opens naturally. The most beautiful thing about the pure spiritual realm is not the dream itself, but the trace it leaves when you wake. The change is quiet. You don't need to tell anyone, but you notice it. You don't react the same way. You don't fall into despair as quickly. You're no longer as harsh with yourself. It's as if something very deep has been touched. And from that point on, you no longer feel lost in life. But it is precisely because the soul moves into light that it begins to face another truth. Not every realm is gentle. Not every door that opens is safe. If light exists, darkness exists too. In the next part, we speak about the darker regions of sleep, not to create fear, but to understand why preparation of the soul matters so deeply each time you close your eyes. Part 5. When sleep doesn't lead only to light, the deeper consciousness goes, the easier it becomes to forget that not every invisible doorway leads to gentleness. Edgar Cayce spoke very plainly about this. Sleep does not only lift the soul upward, sometimes it carries it through darker regions, places we avoid looking at during the day, not as punishment, but as reflection. There are nights when you wake feeling exhausted even though you did nothing physically demanding. Your dreams feel fragmented, oppressive, unclear, yet they leave behind a heavy residue. You wake with a racing heart, an aching body, a sense that your energy has been drained. We blame stress, diet, lack of sleep, but Cayce saw another layer. There are times when the soul wanders through lower realms, places dense with unresolved emotions, lingering energies unable to release the physical world. I once heard of a young man deeply curious about spiritual experiences. He read obsessively, watched countless videos, and wanted to prove that the soul could leave the body. But he entered sleep with a chaotic mind, full of craving for experience, without stillness. Over time, he began to have recurring nightmares. Not graphic horror, but the feeling of being chased, attached to, watched. He woke increasingly exhausted. His vitality faded. His mood darkened for no clear reason. Only when he sought guidance did he understand. His soul had become a point of attachment for entities still trapped in fear, hunger for energy, and instability. This may sound frightening, but Casey did not tell such stories to scare people away from sleep. He emphasized something very grounded. The soul, like the body, needs protection. When you step into the world angry, exhausted, unstable, you're more likely to run into trouble. When the soul enters sleep in the same state, it drifts toward corresponding realms. These darker regions are not evil. They are simply gatherings of what has not been released, souls clinging to regret, emotions left unhealed, fears without names. When your soul carries too much anger, resentment, ambition, or unrest, it's like a lamp lit in the dark, attracting what seeks attachment. But the key is this: you are not powerless. Casey emphasized that preparation before sleep is far more powerful than we realize. A prayer without words, a few moments of stillness to slow your breath, or simply imagining yourself surrounded by a gentle, non-dramatic light. These small acts are boundaries. They are protection, keeping the soul from being swept into chaotic currents. You can test this yourself. On nights when you sleep feeling heavy, dreams tend to be tangled and exhausting. On nights when you sleep after releasing tension, dreams become lighter or forgotten entirely, yet you wake feeling at ease. Sleep is not random. It faithfully reflects the inner state you carry when you close your eyes. Casey never advised people to avoid darkness. He said to move through it with awareness and preparation, because darkness does not come to destroy, but to reveal what still needs healing. When you learn to enter sleep with respect and clear intention, the soul no longer wanders aimlessly. It knows where it's going, and more importantly, how to return safely. Perhaps that's why people who change the way they sleep, not sleeping more, but sleeping consciously, begin to notice real changes in daily life. Less exhaustion, less extreme reactions, as if the soul has stopped being pulled into draining realms and begun conserving its vitality. But the journey doesn't stop at avoiding darkness. When the soul learns to travel through sleep safely, another capacity opens, bringing healing back to the body, not only to the psyche, but to visible wounds as well. Part 6. When the soul brings healing back to the body, there is something many people don't realize. The body isn't only tired from what we do during the day, but also from what the soul experiences at night. Edgar Casey said the soul and the body are not as separate as we think. Every nightly journey leaves a trace. Sometimes unexplained pain, chronic fatigue, or conditions medicine cannot fully explain begin with deep encounters during sleep. We often think illness comes from genetics, environment, lifestyle. That's not wrong, but Casey saw another layer. Some injuries don't begin in the body. They begin in the energy the soul brings back. When the soul passes through lower realms, witnesses suffering or violence, or becomes entangled in unresolved emotion, it can return with invisible abrasions. These don't show up immediately. They accumulate, eventually manifesting as persistent pain, nameless disorders, or exhaustion that rest cannot fix. But if the soul can bring back injury, it can also bring back healing. Casey recorded many such cases. One involved a woman with severe spinal degeneration. She could barely walk. Her body was frail, pain constant, and medical treatment could only sustain her. When she sought Casey, she wasn't promised a miracle. She was given one simple instruction: each night before sleep, let the mind settle and ask to be guided to healing. Her dreams changed. She dreamed of lying in a softly luminous space, surrounded by beings without form, only warm light, no words. No aggressive intervention, just the sensation of hands placed gently on her back, of being held and supported. Night after night, these dream treatments continued, slowly, but undeniably. Her body began to recover, pain eased. She could sit, then stand, then take her first steps in years. X-rays later showed regeneration medicine could not explain. Casey did not call it a miracle. He said calmly. Her soul accessed healing energy and brought it back to the body. This story is not meant to inspire unrealistic hope. It reminds us that sleep is not passive. When the soul reaches higher realms, where energy is balanced and pure, the body naturally benefits. Healing does not stop at the physical. There are fears you carry your entire life without knowing why. Intense reactions to harmless situations, persistent guilt, anxiety, or dread without a clear cause. Casey called these karmic imprints, not to trap people in the past, but to show that some circles remain unfinished. He once described a woman who had feared water since childhood, unable to approach rivers or lakes. No event in her current life explained it. In a deep dream, after praying to understand, she relived another lifetime, drowning while trying to save her child. The pain followed her into this life, but this time, the dream did not end the same way. She saved the child. When she woke, the fear of water vanished, not by forcing courage, but because the soul had completed what was unfinished. In moments like these, sleep becomes a place where the soul returns to its fractures, not to suffer again, but to complete them. When a circle closes, relief spreads beyond dreams into waking life. You respond differently. You feel less tension. You are no longer pulled back by invisible fear. That is why Casey emphasized that sleep is not just rest. It is deep recalibration. It adjusts what the body cannot, what the mind cannot reach. And when the soul heals, the body and life slowly follow. But one question remains. If sleep can heal, realign, and guide, where is it ultimately leading us? Part 7. Sleep is not the end of a day. It opens a path. When you look at the soul's nightly journey as a whole, one truth becomes clear. Sleep has never been a meaningless gap between 2 days. It is where the soul continues conversations the waking mind often ignores. There we meet the dead and remember that love never left. We touch deeper memories and remember we didn't start from nothing. We merge with light and feel we're not alone. We pass through darkness and see what still needs healing. And finally, we return to the body, quietly changed, steadily transformed. The deeper one understands sleep, the less one seeks dramatic experiences. Curiosity becomes reverence, no longer chasing strange dreams or special signs, just sleeping with respect, as if each night were a real meeting between you and your soul. No rituals required, no beliefs enforced, only allowing yourself to enter sleep differently, slower, softer, more honest. I've met people who, after changing how they fall asleep, saw their daytime lives shift, not because dreams became clearer, but because they began listening to themselves. Less impulsive reaction, less self-blame, less fear of the unknown, as if the soul had been reminded it was on the right path and no longer needed to scream through anxiety. At its deepest level, sleep doesn't just heal or guide. It reminds you that life is not random. You may not know where you're going, but the soul remembers. And each night, as consciousness loosens, the soul gently adjusts direction, patiently, quietly. That's why some mornings you wake without clear answers, yet feel a subtle certainty that you should live differently. Slower, kinder, more honest with yourself. Not everyone remembers the soul's night journey, but no one is untouched by it. Some changes don't need images as proof. They appear in how you face pain, how you love without gripping, how you let go without resentment. These are the traces of journeys your soul completed while you slept. If there is one thing to carry from this entire story, it is this. Do not treat sleep as something to endure after a long day. Treat it as part of your inner life, where you don't need to try, prove, or achieve. Only allow yourself to return to your most original state. From there, what you seek outside, peace, direction, meaning, begins to arise naturally from within. Tonight, when you lie down, nothing dramatic may happen. Your dreams may feel ordinary, or your soul may bring back something subtle, almost unnamed. If it does, trust that it is not meaningless. Some messages are not meant to be understood immediately. They stay, quietly reshaping how you live. So before we close, I'll leave you with one question, not for the mind to answer, but for the soul to speak. If every night your soul quietly guides you, are you truly listening during the day? If this story touched you at any moment, a memory, a dream, a familiar feeling, share your experience in the comments. Your story may be the message someone else needs to hear. And if you want to continue exploring deeper conversations about the soul, sleep, and healing, follow the channel so we can keep walking this path together.